That is probably one of the craziest UFO sighting videos that I've seen recently, and it was actually sent in by a viewer of this channel. And we're going to be digging into it and taking a much better in-depth look at that a little bit later. But welcome to Weird Week, guys. If you're new here, this is our weekly show where we recap all of the weird and wild things that have happened around the world in the last 7 days. And honestly, if we covered all of it, I'd probably be stuck in an eternal live stream of strangeness. But luckily for you and for me, I've condensed it down to the best bits. So today we're going to be looking at Dr. Courtney Brown, who I'm going to say right now has finally given us some answers as to what is actually going on in the world of UFOs and non-human intelligence. Now, he doesn't actually have proof, but the things that he has said really connect the dots and just make a lot of sense. And we're going to be looking at that. We've also got an update from Steven Greer, finally, and one of the most insane examples of predictive programming. That's going to be your sweet little treat today if you make it all the way to the end. So if this is your kind of jam and you want to come along with me, please subscribe. If you're not new, welcome back. Get yourself a coffee, get comfy, you know the drill, because we are about to go on a wild ride. Now, to kick things off today, I actually want to show you something that I literally just came across right now. So I had to quickly throw this in here because we have what I'm going to call the Psychic Olympics. That's what I've called it because that is basically what it is. But the actual name is the 2025 Psi Games. Now, I had a quick look over the website, but I thought it would be fun to just kind of look at it together because the fact that this is real is crazy. So let's hop over here. This is the website. So, Unleashing the Extraordinary, a global arena for psychic abilities. Explore, learn, and compete in psi skills with a supportive community dedicated to consciousness exploration. So this is like a real deal competitive games, pitting people against each other and testing their psychic abilities. And this is going to be taking place in Charlottesville on August 1st to 3rd. So this is a multi-day event happening this year. About the Psi Games. The Psi Games is a dynamic and inclusive platform for individuals with psychic abilities, whether seasoned practitioners or newcomers eager to develop their skills. This groundbreaking event provides an opportunity to learn from experts, connect with peers, and compete in 5 distinct Psi categories. By elevating these often overlooked abilities to international competition, the Psi Games foster personal growth, drive new discoveries in parapsychology, and promote broader acceptance of Psi phenomena worldwide. So this thing is obviously about bringing this whole concept to a much larger audience. And honestly, this is a pretty cool concept, and it's just crazy. Now, my dog wants to go out, so please give me 1 second. We're back. She was sleeping. I'm loud. I get it. Okay, let's keep going here. Learn from the leading experts in the field of parapsychology and psi phenomena through a series of lectures and interactive classes designed to expand your knowledge, sharpen your intuitive abilities, and develop advanced psi skills. Okay, so let's take a look here. Keynote speakers. Tom Campbell, Adam Curry, Danny Sheehan, and Chris Bledsoe are going to be speaking at this event. That's very interesting. And it's going to be emceed by Jimmy Church, the host of Fade to Black. So these people are going to be giving lectures. There's going to be lectures and talks happening at this event. Diane Hennessy Powell, John Alexander, Alan Steinfeld, and Paul Smith. Oh my God. No, I'm kidding. I don't know who the fuck these people are. But I'm sure they know what they're talking about. So we've got a psi phenomena expert, consciousness explorer, remote viewing expert, military Stargate program officer. This is a program officer from Project Stargate. So I don't know who these people are, but they obviously know what they're talking about. Psychokinesis and meditation expert. There's some interesting people here. Oh, that's Chris Ramsey. That's Area 52. That's Chris Ramsey. So if those of you who don't actually know, Chris Ramsey is also a magician. And that's what it says here, illusionist and mentalist. He's done some of his magic tricks on his channel before. And honestly, he's really good. So that's cool. He's going to be there as well. These people are going to be judging the event. Wow, a lot of judges. Jordan Crowder. So there's another social media guy, alive and kicking. He's going to be commentating the event. Damn, so this is a big thing. Brian Bledsoe's there as well. There's a lot of people involved in this. This seems like it's going to be quite a big event. So here we go. These are the categories that you can compete in. Dowsing. Test your skill at dowsing as you tap into your ability. Okay, I can't read that quickly, so how do we... Okay, here we go. Test your skill at dowsing as you tap... Okay, it's okay. I'll find it. Where about learn apply for the game. So if you guys want to apply, you can come to this website and apply. I want to know, what are the categories that people are competing in? If you want a ticket, $150, right up to $675. I hope they live stream this thing. That'll be really cool. I mean, the fact that this is even a thing is just crazy. Okay, come on. Where are the categories? Psi challenges and practices. Here we go. So there's remote viewing challenges. Watch the mind-bending abilities of our contestants as they step into the unknown. In this thrilling showdown, 5 unique images are sealed in identical envelopes, each concealing a scene only one can guess. Competitors isolated in separate booths have just 10 minutes to see inside their envelopes and sketch what they believe is hidden within. Man, that's crazy. I mean, like, some people could flop badly. Like, you know, in something like that, if people are way off, I wonder if that's going to like damage this whole concept. Like, is there the potential for this to actually have a negative impact on this topic rather than a positive one? Mindsight challenges. Witness the ultimate test of being connected to all things as contestants try to unlock a mystery code without seeing a single clue. In this thrilling showdown, a locked 3-digit safe sits on the table holding a hidden code that only intuition and mindsight can reveal. Blindfolded and racing against a 3-minute timer, each competitor must feel out the code, jotting down their best guesses in a hope of unlocking victory. Dowsing challenges. Okay, this is what we were trying to read before. Step into a world of awareness and intuition as competitors use dowsing tools to reveal hidden treasures. 5 identical black cups conceal a unique object beneath each: water, gold, silver, copper, and iron. Contestants have just 5 minutes to sense and identify the hidden item under each cup, relying on nothing but their dowsing skills. With the arrangement freshly randomized for each turn, every round is a fresh test of skill. Psychokinesis challenges. Step into the thrilling dice challenge where contestants use focus and intention to influence the roll of a custom die. Each player is assigned a target color, yellow or blue, and rolls the die 5 times, aiming to land on their color as often as possible. I feel like that's a tough one to judge, right? Because how do you know that's not just luck? But it looks like there's so these are multiple challenges within each of these categories. I'm not going to read all of them for you guys because we've got a whole bunch of stuff to get into today. But I will read this last one. So precognition challenges. Watch as competitor test their ability to see beyond the now. In this captivating exercise of precognition, the goal is straightforward yet thrilling. Mentally uncover the 5 color sequence that will be displayed on their screen, using only their mind's eye to perceive the exact order. With intense focus and clarity, they will attempt to replicate the sequence on their screen before time is up and the sequence is revealed. Interesting. And okay, so these are more challenges. So there's remote viewing, skill development practices going on. Oh, right. Sorry. These aren't challenges. These are like workshops. Mindsight skill development, dowsing skill development, psychokinesis, and precognition. Okay, so all the things that they are testing the contestants on, they're also seemingly running like workshops on as well. So if you think maybe Josh Stradamus should apply for this, maybe I would do well. But if you guys want to apply, I'll leave a link to this one in the show notes. And that's probably everything worth looking at, I think, for today's show. So let's jump back here. Look, that wasn't meant to happen, but hey, we do this show live. These things happen and it's okay. So we're going to be diving into the first topic today. We're going to be looking at Dr. Courtney Brown. Now, we've got a lot of clips from the podcast that Dr. Courtney Brown was on this week. And before I show you those, I want to give you some context and I want to look at his credentials, okay? Because What you're about to hear are some very wild claims. And as I said, though, they do make sense if you can get over the initial hump of the fact that NHI, non-human intelligence, are real. Everything that Courtney says makes a lot of sense, okay, and kind of connects this whole picture together. But you have to get over that hump first, okay? So let's take a look at these credentials here. So this is from his Wikipedia page. Courtney Brown, born 1952, is an American political scientist and parapsychologist who is an associate professor in the political science department at Emory University. He is known for promoting the use of nonlinear mathematics in social scientific research and as a proponent of remote viewing, a form of extrasensory perception. He is the founder of the FarSight Institute. So that is his like remote viewing company and organization that he kind of runs all of this stuff out of. And he is also the CEO of FarSight Prime, which is basically a streaming service where he shows all of the remote viewing things that he does. His education, so he got his PhD, he's got a doctorate at Washington University, got his master's degree at San Francisco State University, and a bachelor's at Rutgers University. Brown's research in applied mathematics is mostly focused on social science applications of time-dependent models. He has published 5 peer-reviewed books and numerous articles on the subject of applied mathematics. Brown is also an advocate of the use of the R programming language for both statistical as well as nonlinear modeling applications in social sciences. So if you understand what those last couple of sentences mean, fantastic. You can let me and others know in the comments. But the point of me showing you this, guys, is so you understand that he isn't some crackpot that is from the desert that I've just pulled onto this show, okay? He's got some credentials behind him, okay? This is a smart, intelligent man. So I just wanted to put that there before we get into some of these crazy clips.
So when you're looking at this pen, you're looking at it through the ocular image of your eyes going into the brain. And then the neurologists, the people who study brains, found out that it's as if it's being projected literally onto a layer of cells that act like a screen, like a movie screen, a layer of cells in the brain, this picture, and it's very bright. Now, if I take the pen away, but I say bring it back in your memory and you remember it, you can still see the pen in front of me, but it's more translucent. It's not as bright and solid and opaque as this one, but you can still see it in the memory. Well, the remote viewing image is dimmer, foggier, fuzzier than the remembered image. So there's 3 levels of perception. One is through the eyes, that's bright, hard, opaque. One is memory, same type of thing, but not quite as opaque, translucent, and then the remote viewing stuff.
So that makes a lot of sense, right? And it's refreshing to have some like genuine and clear explanations for how this crazy stuff that we always hear about actually works. But of course, it's important to not like fully take it for like face value, like anything we hear or see on the internet, right? But at least what he's saying is true and it makes sense because we can all relate to that, right? We can understand that when he removes that pen, we can still imagine it there, like we can see it when we try to remember it. So, you know, when someone with a PhD is explaining this stuff to us and helping us make sense of what remote viewing is and how it works, I think it's worth paying attention to, you know, or at least lending some serious consideration to some of the concepts and ideas that he provides. Because look, let's be real. The primitive stance of needing hard proof in front of you to believe anything is just completely flawed. Because, you know, to those people, like, do you believe in oxygen? Is that a hoax because you can't see it? Like, you should go up and try breathing in space and let us all know how you go. Do you believe in Wi-Fi signals, radio signals, TV signals? Like, are you waiting to see that too before you believe it? No, you're not. You have like an unquestioning acceptance when it comes to these kind of things, right? Because these dots, these concepts don't disrupt the mold that your mind has created of reality. So you just kind of easily are able to accept it. But it's important to remember that it's only your mind that sees the world exactly the way you do. Everyone has a very different perspective. We might share a lot of common understandings of things, for most things, but there's always going to be variables in the way that we interpret the world on like a broader scale. So given the fact that you accept Wi-Fi for being real and that your birthday is actually the day that you were told it is, because, you know, you don't actually know that, you just believe it because you've been told, we can probably assume that if you're here watching this video, you might at the very least have a tiny little inkling that your government hasn't been telling you the truth or the whole truth about what's going on in the world. So given that, maybe consider that this could just be one of those things, one of those invisible things like Wi-Fi and signal that actually exists, but they just didn't tell you about this one.
We have had actual direct extraterrestrial contact since I was a kid. This is not something new, but we kept it secret and we didn't let anyone know until January of 2022, when the extraterrestrials told us we had to do everything public and we had to come up completely everything. So the procedures that we use now were helped by the extraterrestrials themselves. I tried to modify the original remote viewing procedures of the military, and I just didn't get it. Like, I couldn't really make an advance on it. And the ETs were the ones who actually nudged us, like a graduate student mentor relationship, told us what to do, and they became much better at those procedures. So there are two basic groupings of extraterrestrials interacting with Earth right now. We call them the good guys and the bad guys, or the good ETs and the bad ETs. The bad ETs, from our perspective, have literally written agreements with the United States government to help reverse engineer some of the technology in the crashed ships so that the United States government can develop their own advanced tech in what they call the secret space program. Now, that aspect of the written agreements, if you know anything about what's going on, is not in dispute. And if you want to use Google Haim Eshed, Haim, second name Eshed, Eshed. He was the former CEO, the top guy in the Israeli Space Directorate for 30 years. He gave an interview that he thought he was going to be able to get away with in Hebrew, in a Hebrew publication, but he didn't realize how many people understood Hebrew, and it was immediately translated into a zillion languages, where he actually talked about the written agreements and the interactions with both the Israeli government, but also some other governments, but specifically the United States government, and he talked about the written agreements between these groups, between the ETs and the U.S. government.
So Courtney Brown there is saying exactly what Lieutenant Colonel John Blitch told us recently, which was, remember, supported by Sergeant Major Robert Dean, that there really is an agreement between the US military and ET species who apparently doesn't have our best interest at heart. That's what these people in the military are telling us, okay? Now, Courtney doesn't actually speak on the abduction side of things like John Blitch did, but he says that this species have given the US military the technology to shoot down the craft of the good ETs, the ones that do want to help us. And they've basically made a deal where they will help them reverse engineer them for weapons and technology. And as he says in this interview, it makes total sense, right? People often say, oh, how could they fly all the way here and then they just suddenly crash? Like they've got the technology to go across the galaxy and then they fail in a thunderstorm. Well, it's because they're being shot down. Hey, they're not just crashing, they're being shot down. And that's what Jake Barber has said, John Blitch has said, Steven Greer has said, many other people have been telling us this, okay? They're being shot down. And Courtney has given us context to the fact that it's not really our choice, ours as in humans. We're either being like instructed, controlled, or forced to do this. And we've spoken a lot recently in the last few videos about how the testimony and evidence that's coming out really does point to the fact that certain three-letter intelligence agencies and the upper echelons of the military and private defense contractors are seemingly compromised or complicit, one or the other. Compromised by a super non-human intelligence. If we can just get past the single fact that non-human intelligence is real and it is interacting with this planet and humanity, as Colonel Carl Nell told us last year, if we can digest that, then everything I've just said really makes a lot of sense as to why things have unfolded the way that they have, why the secrecy has been locked down tighter than anything else in human history. And that's because it's being orchestrated by something that is not human. It's crazy, but it makes sense if you can get over that hump. Now, he also brought up the Haim Eshed interview. We've spoken about him and that interview on this channel many times, and how he kind of just mysteriously went very silent after giving that groundbreaking interview back in 2020. And here's a little clip talking about some of those quotes that we've looked at before on this channel. 2020, this article came out. A galactic federation has supposedly been in contact with Israel and the US for years, but they are keeping themselves a secret to prevent hysteria until humanity is ready. These extraterrestrials are interested in understanding the fabric of the universe, and that this cooperation includes a secret underground base on Mars where there are both American and alien representatives. Ed claims that Trump was on the verge of disclosing the existence of these extraterrestrial contacts, but the Galactic Federation stopped him to prevent mass hysteria. They believe humanity still needs to evolve and reach a stage where we will understand what space and spaceships are. So, according to the head of Israel's space program and Brigadier General of the Israeli Defense Force, Trump wanted to disclose the truth in his last term, but was told not to. And then obviously we had 4 years of different leadership, which, by the way, we are now uncovering in real time. We're sending money around the world for some extremely questionable shit under the guise of USAID. For example, remember how when David Grush spoke out in 2023 and like within 24 hours, there was a hit piece written about him and trying to use the PTSD that he'd suffered from serving his country to destroy his credibility? Well, it turns out, if you're an American citizen, you, the taxpayer, actually funded that for the sweet price of $208,000, $208,790. That is crazy. If you're an American citizen, like you inadvertently paid Kenneth Klippelstein, whatever his name is, to write a hit piece article on a man who was brave enough to speak the truth and use the injuries that he sustained while serving and protecting you and your country against him. Now, obviously, that's not your fault. You didn't do that. You didn't know that. You were lied to. But people in your government did. They did that to an American citizen. Like, I mean, I don't need to go any further than that, really. Like, this USAID stuff, like, it's telling its own story. It's dirty, it's nasty, it's abhorrent, and the things that are coming out right now, man, it's ugly. We don't even need to go there. Like, you just need to look it up and you see for yourself.
Then there was some military conflicts between new ET arrivals that didn't like what the bad ETs were doing. They ran this place as a prison. Long story short, there was a huge galactic war. You might call it a large galactic holocaust that was worse than anything that's happened on Earth. And it's over now, mostly. The two sides are not actively fighting anymore. But at that time, Earth was set up as a prison. And that's what was going on. And then, more recently, about 1,500 years ago, there was actually it started back in the actual pyramid building days, so it was happening early. There were some conflicts between good ETs that were coming by and saying, this is crazy, this is ridiculous, and they disrupted the bad ETs from operating the way they wanted, which is a complete slave society that worked with rock. And the bad ETs started to do work behind the scenes, manipulating things from behind, changing religions so that if the Greek and Roman gods, which had things going really nicely, didn't work anymore, then they modified Christianity to have saints and so on like that. They had a saint for every substitute. For every Greek and Roman god, you had a substitute saint doing something. And it eventually boiled down into religions that started out to be really interesting, but they ended up being, if you don't get down on your knees and beg for forgiveness, you are going to be burning in the fires of hell for all eternity, which is crazy stuff. But that they wanted this control mechanism over humanity. And then, there's been pressure from the good ETs who have been totally locked out of the power structure, the elite power structure. And so the good ETs developed a different approach. They require a free will choice, But you weren't getting that from the elite who actually signed agreements with the bad ETs. The good ETs had developed a new strategy, which is if we can't get the free will decision from the elite, let's deal with the masses. So what they have been doing over a great many years is, I'll give you some examples. They've been dropping ideas in the middle of night when the screenwriters, when the script writers and producers and directors are sleeping in Hollywood. And when they wake up, they say, "Oh, I've got this great idea for a new movie." And then and now the good ETs are free will fanatics, so they're not going to force anybody to do it. But a good idea is a good idea, and the screenwriters think it's their idea, and that's where you got Star Wars. That's where you got Star Trek. That's where you got the Matrix movies. All the stuff coming out. A lot of the Ghosts in the Shells, a lot of the high-tech, interesting sci-fi stuff that you see coming out of Hollywood and some Japanimation and things like that came from the good ETs. So what they were doing is they were changing the ideas in the society, making the society ready for this open contact. If it wasn't for that, we'd be stuck way back in the dark ages. So all these ideas, they were being brought to the surface without the agreement with the US government and without the agreement of the bad ETs. It was a revolution slowly percolating from below.
So Earth was set up and ran like a prison. Let's get into that. There's a lot in that clip. We'll go through all of it. Let's start with that. Now, I've never been to prison, but the general idea that I get is that unless you're some crazy high security prisoner that needs to be locked away at all times, you have the ability to do jobs and tasks within the prison to earn a small wage, which you can then use to buy food and small things that you might want. At least in Australia, I'm pretty sure that's like the general case in most normal prisons. Now that literally just sounds like a rough version of what we all do every day. I mean, like you hear about people who are in prison for a while and then they get out and they're like, fuck this, I want to go back to the other prison. Like at least in my other prison, if I don't want to work, I still get a roof over my head. I still have a place to sleep. In this shit place, I have to pay $600 a week to rent a crap 2-bedroom house and have to work 40 hours a week to do that. So the whole prison planet thing really isn't that far off, in my opinion. Like terms like the rat race, wage slaves, money is the root of all evil. Like these sayings probably didn't just appear and continue to linger in our dialect if there was no substance to them, right? Now he says good ETs began to apply pressure in their own non-interfering way to try and change the landscape of how Earth was ran. And by the way, I wish he gave us some names for who these good ETs and bad ETs are. He's obviously like a very intelligent and successful person, but listening to him, and now you also have to listen to me say the good ETs and the bad ETs, it's really just, I don't know, it's just a bit cringy, isn't it? But look, if I had to put some money on who I think we are talking about here, I would say the bad ETs start with and end with eptillions. And the good ETs, I really have no clue. If I had to pick something, I would say I'm picturing like the classic Nordic looking human beings, but I really have no idea. So please make your own mind up here. So anyway, the bad ETs began to manipulate things from behind the scenes, such as religion, to keep a grip on humanity and control them. And this part really resonated with me because I literally made pretty much this exact point earlier in the week with a few of you guys when we were chatting about this stuff in Discord. Here, this is what I said. The one thing I cannot grasp about religion, or I guess Christianity specifically, because that is the popular faith where I live, is the whole concept of, if you don't follow me, you will burn in hell. Obviously, that's not a verbatim quote, but that is the general consensus. I can't subscribe to that ultimatum. That doesn't feel like true love, peace, and joy. That feels like blackmail. Now, relax. If you're religious, I'm not knocking you, okay? I think religion has a lot of great messages. I think they generally encourage people to lead a more positive life. And I think that is what religion was meant to be, or at the very least, it's what religion should be. It should be like a teaching, a practice, a way of life. A threat to like fall in line, worship, repent, to avoid burning in hell. Like, how about fuck you, actually? I'm sorry. But like, that was probably a little bit unnecessary. But so is telling me that I'm going to burn in hell if I don't come and eat your weird crusty bread and cranberry juice on a Sunday. Like, I'm busy. I'm busy. I'm working 5 days so I can pay for my shitty 2-bedroom apartment, remember? Now I got to come worship you on a Sunday as well? Like, brother, give me a break. I'm struggling out here. And look, I'm obviously having fun with this, but like, and because I really do think there is merit to every religion, but it's just the whole loving God who created me, but is now threatening me part that I just really struggle to see eye to eye with. And I'm positive I'm not alone here. So, also, very interestingly, he talks about how the good ETs are responsible for imbuing creatives and artists with these ideas. And yeah, this part is really cool. So he talks about like Star Wars and Star Trek, right? He's saying how good ETs actually place these concepts and ideas in the minds of artists. Because imagine, like seriously, imagine what the world would be like if they were never created, if sci-fi as a concept and a genre never existed. Like a single word about any kind of like intelligent life, entities, anything existing beyond our planet has never been uttered. Like it would just be like just crazy talk to even suggest that. Like what would the world be like right now if that was the case? And I think until you actually kind of take a moment to like ponder that concept, you don't really realize the gravity that some of these movies have had on society. And as Jake Barber and many others have said before him, and we've spoken about this on this channel a lot too, artists channel their inspiration from something. Okay, it comes from somewhere. And even Michael Jackson said this back in the day. He said that he can't take full credit for Billie Jean because he knew that the idea wasn't his. He says it came to him and he just refuses to take full credibility because he knows the idea came to him. It's crazy. And like, it really feels like artists are actually like alchemists, like transmuting these ideas and concepts that they say just come to them into vibrations for music or physical matter, you know, if they're painting or whatever. And then these ideas actually affect the direction that society goes. They have an impact on the ideas and things that we then subscribe ourselves to. Because whether it's like music, film, paintings, poetry, like they impact society. People relate to artwork. They align and subscribe themselves with the emotions and the feelings that these pieces of art elicit. It has the ability to move people and affect them on a very deep level. Like, look back, like think about the way people used to carry on for the Beatles back in the day, or maybe a more modern example is like Justin Bieber when he was a little bit younger. I don't really keep up with this stuff, so I don't know. But you know what I'm saying, right? Something about art and obviously the way that it is promoted creates fanatics. People become diehard fanatical about art, whether it's music or a movie. You know, people like really attach themselves to it. So like, where do these things come from? Why do we sometimes feel as an artist that we have like a writer's block or we're struggling to find inspiration, but then suddenly something just pops into your head and you're off? Like I experience this myself. I don't ever force a video out. I just find something and I get excited about it. And when that happens, it literally feels like the bandwidth of my mind and my thought increases tenfold. And suddenly my fingers can't even keep up with the ideas that are like spewing into my mind. Like it's crazy. It's very interesting. Let's check out the next one.
Totalitarian, authoritarian societies try to keep people in and not let people out. So with regard to authoritarian, totalitarian groups within the galaxy, it would turn out to be the same way. They would lose their entire population. Every time a person died, they would just go someplace else. So they had to stop that from happening, and that involved technology. So what happens is when somebody dies, the normal process, in fact, the normal process elsewhere in the galaxy is when you die, it's not a surprise. The body simply stops functioning. You pop out of it, and everyone can still see you. You can see them. You don't lose your bank account. You don't lose your car. You don't lose your wife, your husband, your spouse, your friends, or anything. Everybody knows you're still there, and you can get another body, or if you feel like it, you can go from the beginning and be a baby again. But you don't lose that stuff because everyone knows that the body is not you. So why does that not work here on Earth? Because this prison system has been set up with extremely advanced technology. You have to understand, we are talking about civilizations that have been around for like 1 million years, and everything that can be invented has been invented. Technology is not the cutting edge of science out there in the galaxy. The cutting edge of science is social science, trying to figure out how societies can operate in, new ways of societies developing in the galaxy. But what we have now is a situation where you die physically, the body dies, and information has been kept from you while you're alive as a physical being. So you die sort of ignorant. And then as soon as you die, you see the light. You've heard that story? Well, that's true. You see the light and you get drawn to the light. It's like a magnetic pull, very warm, embracing light, and it pulls you in. And then if you start to resist it and fight it, it's like being stuck in a fly trap. The more you resist, the more you get stuck. And it draws you in. And then once you're in, you get zapped with a lightning, essentially a high voltage bolt that's way higher voltage than, say, a lightning bolt. You get zapped with a high voltage shock, like shock treatment. And you can't be killed, but you can be rattled. And what happens is you lose your memory. You lose your telepathic capabilities. You lose your remote viewing perceptual capabilities. You're just stunned. And then an AI comes out. You've heard this story before. An AI comes out and says, you're a very important person. And we've been talking about your case with the Council of Elders. You know the arguments you used to have with your mother? And your daughter has been sort of, she's got some troubles going on. And then the communication you had with your husband was not the best. And remember what happened with your father at the show? We think that you could work on a few of the personality issues just a little bit more. And we think if you went back and just sort of struggled and worked on these personality issues, you could really become sort of perfect. But it's up to you. It's a free will. You can decide for yourself. Well, without memory, without telepathic capabilities, without perceptual capabilities, you inevitably say, sure, sounds good to me. I'll go back and work on a few of the fine points of my personality, and then you go back in. So when you see the light, that's tech you're looking at. You're looking at tech. You're not looking at God. It's technology.
Okay, so that was a pretty wild explanation for how our souls are kept here on repeat, right? And, we always like to build into the weirder stuff. Okay, if I put that at the start of the show, I'm going to freak people out and scare them off. So if you're still here, it's because you're one of the weird ones. So if you watch all of my videos, or maybe even just watch my last video, and your brain has autistic levels of pattern recognition like mine, you would have already thought about the clip that I'm about to show you. So just keep in mind the part that we just heard there about the technology that zaps you when you die to keep you stuck here on Earth.
My dad has met Bill Tompkins, the guy who supposedly built the ships for the space program. Do you know who I'm talking about?
I was referring to some of his, I was thinking actually, sorry, of some of his illustrations in my head as I was describing it. William Tompkins, correct, right.
Yep. And he sat there at a little Starbucks, I don't know what you call it, patio seating outside.
Yeah.
My dad, Tom DeLonge, the Blink-182 guy,
yep,
and Bill Tompkins. And they sat there and they tried to shop my dad. Shop him as in win him over. And he sat there and he told my dad that Bill Clinton is a 9-foot-tall reptilian. He eats little girls. They slit their throat. They drink the blood and suck the life force out of their body. They zap us with these machines when we die so that they create this little hologram of a light. And when our consciousness goes to it, they reincarnate us back over. And the big secret that the government's been hiding, everybody, is that we're a cattle farm for lizards that live in caves, and the queen and the presidents are lizards. By the way,
So, yeah, you remember that one? Tom DeLonge is almost telling an identical story to what Dr. Courtney Brown is saying. But remember, this isn't like Tom DeLonge's story, okay? He's a guitarist in Blink-182. He didn't just make this up. This is obviously information that he has learned from being involved with people such as Lou Elizondo, Jim Semivan, Bill Tompkins, and probably many, many others. Now, I don't know exactly who that information has come from. It may not even be from the people that I've just mentioned. It could be from higher ups that we don't actually know. That's honestly probably likely the case. But it's safe to say it's coming from somewhere within the military and government. But Dr. Courtney Brown is not tied to the government or military. He actually spends the start of this podcast talking about how all of his work is heavily censored through Google and mainstream platforms. All of the information that he has is through what he calls the good ETs, and is information that he has learned through telepathic communications with them that he says has been ongoing for basically his whole life. And he goes into a lot more detail in this stuff, by the way. If you're interested in this and you're vibing this, I would highly recommend that the whole podcast. If you think these clips are interesting, you will love it. I'll make sure I leave a link to it in the show notes below.
We are now in a situation where disclosure has to happen now, not like 2, 3, 4 years. There is a constant pressure to close down whatever venues exist that are still open in social media. And 2 or 3 years down the line, everything's going to be chucked, stranglehold. It'll be choked off, and the good ETs won't be able to get any information through. So we had to wait until there was enough technology so that you could actually have an internet and you could have the spread of information, but it has to act before that the dark forces have a chance to get complete control of that. They're trying to control social media. TikTok, for example, that was controlled by ByteDance in China, and they were saying publicly China is data mining and finding out information about or spying on American consumers. Wake up. Every single company in the world is spying on American consumers. Google, they're tracking every little click that you make. There's nothing that no one's not spying. The data mining is so totally complete. What they're really talking about is that they don't have any control over TikTok. TikTok is putting things out that the powers that be have no control over, and that's what they're worried about. So they want TikTok to be sold off to some other group of investors who are dying at the bit in order to buy it because it's such a valuable property. But then once it's sort of controlled and operated here, then they'll allow a back door. Then they can control TikTok. So that's the constant cascade that you're going to get 2 or 3 years down the line. So its disclosure is now or never.
So really interesting take there about like social media, especially considering what's happened with TikTok specifically very recently. But he's saying that we basically have a window right now, and we've gotten to a point where the internet and technology is so widespread, but there is like a clock of censorship that is ticking and approaching. And I mean, we've already experienced that with this. Okay, this is my sticker book where I collect all of the misinformation stickers that appear underneath my videos. And I'm sure any day now, we're going to be getting that third sticker, but let's just hope it's not a double. Okay, I don't want to get censored for a sticker that I already have. But if we get a new one, I'll take that. I'm okay with that. So before there is this total lockdown on what is actually allowed to be talked about, Courtney Brown is saying that this message of disclosure needs to get out, because once people genuinely accept that this is real, the obvious next question is like, well, what are they doing? Are they good? Are they bad? Like, what is actually going on? But there's been a massive effort for you to not even get to the point of seriously even considering that question, right? E.g., the $200,000 paid to a journalist to write a hit piece on David Grush, or the pressure that was applied to Mark Zuckerberg and Meta, Facebook, from 2020 to 2024 to censor specific information on his platform, including the Hunter Biden laptop story. Remember, he told us all about this last year in this open letter that he wrote, saying that he regretted and will no longer be conforming to censorship pressure. Now, if you're sitting there going, oh, I didn't know about this letter, like, when was that? I didn't hear about this. I also then encourage you to ask why. Why do you think you didn't hear about this? Well, if you read through this letter, I'm not going to read it for you, so pause it if you want to have a read. Read this letter, and you'll probably be able to work that out for yourself. Now, one last clip to wrap up this segment, and it's going to segue us nicely onto the next one, which is where the host asked Courtney Brown about Steven Greer. And he said the techniques that he had been describing in this podcast sound a lot like Steven Greer's CE5 protocols. And he basically asked him, is that possible? And do you agree with him?
It is possible. I have my differences with Steven, but it is possible, and he's doing a great thing. He's doing a great issue. He's these CE5 things is a valuable thing for people to go out and try to have those types of interactions. On the other hand, the differences that I have with them is he absolutely insists that all the ETs are good, that there's only good ETs out there, and that's simply not the case. That it's as above, so below. There's a mixture, and I really don't like talking about what other people do, so I hesitate to actually comment on what Steven does, but I like to look at the good side of what he does, and there's nothing wrong with that. But the basic idea, and he does try to have some sort of telepathic contact with these ships and sort of bring them in. All that's very good. But on the other hand, it's a very different story that he's telling about what's actually going on. He presents the evil side as mostly the military-industrial complex, the U.S. government, the people that's humans that are trying to throttle all of this, and that if you can just get past that, all the ETs are good and it's the government that's bad. That's just not right. That's just not right. The government is divided and the ETs are divided, and there is a war going on. Right now it's a Cold War, but it's going to burst into a hot war at some point.
So first of all, I want to point out and appreciate how Courtney made it pretty clear, without saying it directly, that he doesn't necessarily agree with Steven Greer about everything that he does, right? But he didn't insult him. He didn't get upset. He didn't call him a grifter. He didn't call him a disinformation agent or shill. He was respectful. He was polite, and he decided to focus on what he felt was the positive side of Greer's work that he felt more aligned with, right? And, I just think the world needs more people like Courtney, because you're not going to always agree with everyone, but it doesn't mean you have to be a dick. But he did dispute Greer's claims that all ETs are good. And to be honest, this makes logical sense, right? You can't really have good without bad. It's called polarity. And remember, bad isn't necessarily like some evil space aliens that are here to shoot ray guns at us. Like, what is bad is subjective to us. Like, if I go swimming in the ocean in the northern part of Australia, right, in Darwin, and a crocodile comes and eats me and kills me, is the crocodile an evil lizard that's here to eat humans? I don't know, maybe. But no, it's just existing and it's following its natural instincts, right? To me, it's evil because I just want to go for a swim and it's trying to eat me. But to the crocodile, it's just hungry and looking for its next meal, and I just happen to be there. And obviously, I would be an idiot for swimming in the ocean in Darwin. So that's kind of like a warped example for you. Hopefully you get what I'm saying, right? We could be dealing with another bad species that's actually just doing its normal thing that it does everywhere, but it just so happens to not work in our favor and is unfortunate for us. Okay, that could literally be the way it works. It's not about like some evil Darth Vader emperor that's here to like do something. I just want to point that out. I don't know if that's the case, but consider these things. So Courtney also commented on how Greer really points the finger at the military-industrial complex as being like 100% responsible as the bad guys. He said it's not the aliens. He says it is the humans. The humans are the bad guys. And Courtney says that this is just not the case. Now, I only said a few videos ago as well that this is very hard to digest, right? And a lot of you guys agree with me. Greer says every single abduction case is done 100% by the US military and has been done as a psyop ever since like the 50s to prepare everyone for a fake alien invasion, to like set the narrative and set the tone of these evil aliens. It's all been the US every single time. And I just can't buy that. I really can't. I could be wrong. I can't prove it. So I'm not going to say I know that and that he is wrong, but I find it very hard to accept. Like the idea of just humans doing that to other humans, like I don't know, it just doesn't feel real. It doesn't feel real. Now, if those parts of the military and government were compromised and actually being orchestrated by a negative non-human intelligence, like I've been suggesting in the last few videos, and like Dr. Courtney Brown is kind of also saying the same thing, Josh Stradamus, by the way, then maybe like this all does start to make a little bit more sense, right? But Steven Greer is very adamant that that is not the case. And again, as I said, the last video, the difference in character between someone like Courtney Brown and someone like Steven Greer, I feel like Steven will die on that sword no matter what. Like, I can't see him putting up his hands and being like, oh, whoops, no, I did get that part wrong. Sorry, guys, I got this bit wrong, but everything else is good. Like, I just, no, I feel like he is sticking to his word no matter what. But we'll see. Time will reveal all. So let's get into some Steven Greer stuff now, because he was just on the Patrick Bet David podcast just a couple of days ago, which is great because I think we've all kind of been waiting for an update from him, because he punched out like 15 podcasts in like 2 days. And then we had the John Blitch interview come out, and I was really expecting to hear from him like straight after that, because in the first episode of the Steven Greer podcast, he said the reason he was doing them is to help explain what was unfolding and not let the government, the evil military industrial complex, run away with the narrative. So after we had John Blitch give us those explosive claims about 7-foot praying mantis abductions and the US military being complicit in those abductions, I was expecting Greer to be all over it the next day, but we had nothing for like quite a few days. But finally, he broke his silence. So here we go. This is what he had to say.
Unfortunately, some of the others doing it are known counterintelligence operatives who are providing false information. So I, briefly had a quick chat with Don Jr. at a meeting, and he had been taken in by a known counterintelligence person named Lou Elizondo, who is someone working to intercept these whistleblowers and then turn.
You seem to be a big fan of his. It's what I hear.
Yeah, no, Elizondo is a paid disinformation person. And
how convinced are you of that?
100%. I have an email from the top guy at the CIA who was there when Ronald Reagan wanted to know about this when he was running for governor, who was a very young postdoc, and he immediately wrote and said this is what he's doing. Now, recently, Mr. Elizondo has started saying more correct information. Initially, he said, all of these objects out here, we don't know what they are or how they fly. Now, these are the man-made ones. And I'll tell you, the mass majority of the UFOs people see, they're not from outer space. They're not alien. They're ours. But they have dangerously been used in false flag operations and deceptive operations, what the Pentagon calls a deceptive indication and warning, or deceptive INW. The pop culture would be false flag.
So I was absolutely wrong here. Steven Greer and Lou Elizondo are not working together secretly, and they still have a very strong dislike for each other, which is a shame. I would love to see these guys get together on a show and kind of talk it out. Like, who's actually, what's going on here? I mean, Steven Greer says that a top guy from the CIA told him that Lou is a disinformation agent. But the upper echelons of the CIA seem to be responsible, or at least playing a big hand in keeping this stuff covered up. So, like, how much can they actually be trusted? But he does make a great point, and this is actually something that I discussed in the very early days of doing Polarity, when I was just doing TikTok videos. Lou Elizondo's story has slowly changed and evolved over time. I wouldn't say changed, it's evolved. For a guy who, this is the part that I always struggled with, right? For a guy who resigned from the government in like 2016, 2017, you would think that from that point, he would be able to say whatever he's cleared to say when he left the government, right? Because he's not involved with them anymore. So he would have his information, he would have what is, cleared to be spoken about, and that's what he could tell. But in the early days of, 2016, 2017, TTSA days, the story was very like, oh, yeah, there are things in the sky, we don't know. Oh, yeah, there could be a threat. But over time, it's felt like there's been like a coordinated plan to like slowly allow people to just digest that. And then next year, he'd give you like a little bit more. a little bit more. And then we're now where we are today, where he's telling us that, oh yeah, we actually have craft that have been reverse engineered. I know this for a fact. It's like, well, you would have known that when you left the government in 2016, right? So why didn't you just say that back then? Why did you slowly do it? I don't know. It's like, it's a good question, right? Does this automatically mean he is a disinformation agent though? Like, no, it could actually be a coordinated plan from the government to acclimatize people to the reality of NHI and UFOs. It may not be a sinister thing though. It may not be a sinister thing like Steven Greer portrays it, which is just a thought, right? Like this could be the effort to tell us in a slow, controlled manner, but it might not be a bad thing. Just a thought. But what actually makes this little love triangle and quite complicated is Ross Coulthart being in the middle, okay, who is probably the most trusted and credible person. I would say, I mean, obviously he has his haters like everyone does, but I think for the most part, everyone could agree that we all trust Ross, right? He's very close to Lou, and he speaks openly and proudly of his like unwavering support for him, and he backs Lou to the death as like an honest guy. But Ross also speaks pretty well about Steven Greer as well, and CE5. I think he's even had his own experiences through those practices with Steven Greer. But he hasn't spoken much about Greer, like he hasn't spoken about him as much or with the same kind of certainty that he speaks about Lou. But he also doesn't trash his name or tell people to stay away either. So we've got two people on either side who are pointing the finger at each other, both with like pretty reasonable question marks over their own heads for their own reasons. But then we've got Ross in the middle kind of saying they're both good guys. You know, like I said, it would be amazing to get them on a show with Ross as like a debate mediator and allow them both to speak. That would be, I think we would all love that, right? Now, this next clip is really interesting. So they're looking at a guy named Albert Stubblebine, who was a 2-star major general in the army, who Greer alleges offered him $2 billion, with a B, $2 billion to stop his investigations and keep quiet. Now, whether you want to believe that part or not, this guy's Wikipedia page is extremely interesting.
This is the person that offered you $2 billion.
Correct.
So, U.S. Army general, who active duty, spent 32 years, beginning an Army officer, later on, intelligence, he's credited redesigning U.S. Army intelligence. Okay, over the course of it, he became widely known that he maintained a keen interest in psychic warfare throughout his career. He sought to develop an army of soldiers with special powers, such as the ability to walk through walls. Whoa.
I mean, yeah. Like, okay, let's just get into it. I want to emphasize, right, the gravity of this to help people grasp what I'm talking about when I say you haven't been told the whole truth. So this is a 2-star major general in the army who actively sought to develop an army of soldiers with special powers, such as the ability to walk through the wall. So does this guy have some absolutely cooked pipe dream and the US military is handing out stars to crackpots? Or does this guy like know something that we don't? I mean, I think that's probably the case, right? So I want us to look at his Wikipedia so we can go through it ourselves. Where are we? Okay, so let's take a look at this. What I want to show you is just down here. So this guy was a key sponsor of the Stargate project, which was the remote viewing project. He required that all of his battalion commanders learn how to bend spoons in the manner of, I'll highlight this so you can see where I am, in the manner of celebrity psychic Uri Geller, and he himself attempted several psychic feats, in addition to walking through walls such as levitation and dispersing distant clouds with his mind. Stubblebine was a key leader in the US military invasion of Grenada after some controversy involving experiments with psychic phenomena. Stubblebine took early retirement from the army in 1984. I mean, like, this is just wild. There was some other crazy stuff here. Check this out. Stubblebine, whose interests included UFOs and parapsychology, was a member of the Oath Keepers. What is that? Oath Keepers is an American far-right anti-government militia whose leaders have been convicted of violently opposing the government of the United States. Man, I feel like that's a whole episode right there. Reading on, he and his wife Rima Libo were active in the Patriot movement and appeared together as guests on the Alex Jones show. Stubblebine and Libo established a non-profit organization called Natural Solutions Foundation, which disseminated conspiracy theories about vaccinations, pharmaceutical companies, and genetically modified foods. Interesting. So these kind of conspiracy theories are not new, by the way. But big pharma, genetically modified foods, vaccinations. None of this stuff is new. Stubblebine believed that an airplane did not crash into the Pentagon on September 11th terrorist attacks, but he said he did not know what did. According to Stubblebine, after analyzing the damage done to the Pentagon by the hijacked aircraft during the September 11th attacks, he concluded an airplane did not make that hole. Interesting. So this is a 2-star general in the army is saying 9/11 wasn't a plane, at least the one that hit the Pentagon. Like, this is just wild. So this guy retired in 1984 and died in 2017. The year that Lou Elizondo and all that stuff really came out. Interesting. I mean, yeah, if you guys want to read more on this, Albert Stubblebine is the wiki. Go and check it out. But yeah, that is crazy.
This is the person that offered you $2 billion.
Correct.
So U.S. Army...
Sorry. Okay. So what I want to show you next. Yeah, okay. We're going to move on to the next clip here.
Consciousness and thought to latch onto the guidance systems of a non-human craft. And people say, this sounds like science fiction. Yeah, well, you're not dealing with a Boeing 777. You're dealing with civilizations hundreds of thousands of years more advanced with technologies commensurate to having socially, spiritually, and technologically evolved for that long and not blown themselves up like we're about to. So those civilizations are at that point where they can have thought, consciousness, mind, technology interface as easily as you and I pick up a cell phone and talk, which would have been magic. One thing I tell people, step out of this little slice of time we're in and realize if you were to go back to Thomas Jefferson and show them your smartphone and video conference someone, well, if you were in Salem, Massachusetts, you'd be burned at the stake as a witch because it would look like, witchcraft. To us, it's an everyday thing. Flipping on a light switch, no one thinks about it. It'd be magic to someone 1,000 years ago. So imagine, now let's extrapolate that technology curve into the future, a few 100,000 or 1,000,000 years. What do you think you're going to have? You're not going to have what everyone's expecting. And this is the blind spot of scientists, frankly. They're always looking at right now or in the rearview mirror. And when you're encountering a civilization's non-human intelligence is this advanced, you've got to put everything you know on a shelf because we don't know anything. I mean, we're like half a step out of the jungle scientifically. But these covert engineering programs that started studying this back in the 40s and 50s, they have all this. I mean, they have figured all that part of it out. And however much you think is sitting out there in the desert, it's 100 times more. Ben Rich, you remember Ben Rich? He was the director, the president of the Lockheed Skunk Works. So the week he died, he had a conversation with a colleague of mine, James Goodall. And Jim Goodall is a very renowned aerospace historian and a mainstream author. And Ben Rich and he knew each other. So he called him up. He was very close to death, had cancer. And Ben Rich says he asks, well, what do you really have out there in the desert? And Ben Rich says, anything you can imagine, anything you've seen on Star Trek or Star Wars, we have it. We've already done it. It's out there in the desert. He says, but not Area 51. And he was talking about in the underground facilities connected to this. So what that opening is connects to a place called the Ant Hill, which is to the east, out in the desert further, and goes underground through a series of bases. They're known as STIFs, subterranean facilities. Some people call them DUMBs, deep underground military bases.
I mean, everything he's saying there in regards to advanced technology, like it makes total sense. Like if we right now are in our primitive stage of Earth that we're in, We have things like Neuralink. We're beginning to seriously discuss like consciousness and telepathy. And we've got declassified documents from CIA to say that they were actually studying consciousness and telepathy 50 years ago. To say that in like 100 or 1,000 years in the future that this is what the cutting edge tech is based upon, like it makes total sense, right? And similar to what Courtney Brown, I said earlier, a lot of this stuff fits together and it makes sense, but it requires you to first get over the initial hump of accepting the fact that non-human intelligence is real and that it is interacting with the planet. And even after so many like decorated military and government personnel have told us that now, they've told us that they are real, they're interacting with us. Many have told us this. People are still struggling with it. He also gave Ben Rich a shout out and Jim Goodall and the connection there to the Skunk Works, which is cool because we've covered that to death on this channel. The Jim Goodall interviews are classic. But it's always interesting to hear other people bringing it up, other people confirming it, because man, imagine, we're never going to know what's everything that's in the Skunk Works, right? But imagine if we did. Imagine if we could imagine if we could remote view the Skunk Works. Somebody needs to do that. Somebody needs to remote view the Skunk Works and tell me what is in there. I need to know.
Now, the other problem is when you tell the actual truth about the subject, you discredit yourself. I was warned by a CIA guy in 1991. He said, if you tell the whole story here, the truth, it will discredit you because it's more bizarre than the fiction they're selling to the public. And that is true. And I've never, had time with you to unpack all of that. But it's a insane amount of disinformation. But remember, if you have technologies like that, Pat, and you have the malicious intent to deceive the public or officials, you can do all kinds of skullduggery, and they have. Now, most people just take it at face value. Even these whistleblowers, they are tactical operators, right? I call them a tactical operator, helicopter, crash retrieval, whatever. They don't know what's going on the strategic level from at the top of that food chain, whether it be corporate or covert government programs. And the long game has always been to blend enough information with disinformation that the disinformation is believable. So, of course, this was very clandestine. It was an attempt to penetrate illegal black projects within our own country. But you're talking 30 years ago now. But President Clinton really did try to fix this, although he never talked about it publicly. And that's kudos to him. And then he backed off because it was just too dangerous. So here's the big problem with any administration. They don't know enough to make a proper strategic plan. And this is why they need good advisors. I don't care if it's me, but it's got to be somebody. It can't be somebody who's going to give you 1 part truth and 3 parts misinformation or disinformation, or fold in all those scary alien stuff.
Well,
that's false, which is exactly what people like Elizondo and others are doing. Let's say that everything I'm saying is true. Mm-hmm. This is all planning to come out this year through the intelligence community and a whole group of whistleblowers with the evidence and the proof. If this is handled wrong, what I've had conversations with people who have coming into the administration, they know that this will be 1,000 times worse than what went bad with COVID. It'll be 1,000 times worse than that.
Why is that?
Because if you get this wrong and it pivots the whole world in a panic, because there's non-human intelligence out there that are presented as a threat, that are abducting people and killing people and doing this, and it gets spun and mutilated into that direction, which has always been this covert group's plan. Then we're going to go into a dystopian tailspin that will be way worse than COVID. So, but if you get it right, you get the golden age.
So the first part there about if you tell the whole truth, it will discredit you because the actual truth is just far crazier than people realize. It makes me wonder, like, given the whole terrible truth theory and what Courtney Brown said about the prison planet is potentially maybe somewhere in the right ballpark, because that's a pretty crazy theory. But as we saw, it does kind of make sense if you were to connect those dots. But I'm sure anyone who's ever dipped their toes into this, I'm sure anyone who's never dipped their toes into this subject, if they watched that Courtney Brown podcast, they would just be like, this guy's off the deep end. Like, what the hell is he talking about? But again, this guy has a lot of credentials. He teaches at a university still to this day. Like, he's not an idiot. That doesn't mean believe everything that he says, but you can't just outright dismiss him just because it sounds crazy. Another strange link here is actually Steven Greer and Tom DeLonge, because Tom has spoken about his time that he spent with Steven Greer out in the desert doing CE5 with him. But according to Ryan Bledsoe, Tom was trying to tell him that Bill Clinton is a 9-foot lizard person. But Steven Greer is saying that Clinton actually tried to stop all of these black operations from happening beyond the government oversight. So obviously Tom's story isn't really verified. Like, we don't have proof of that, but it's just an example of two wildly different takes or perspectives of the same thing by people who are acquaintances at the very least. You might even go as far as saying Tom and Greer are friendly or friends. I'm sure they don't hang out every other day, but they certainly know each other, and they certainly, have spent time together. So it's just weird that we have these extremely different takes on the same thing. And how do you guys think we're going to handle this, by the way? If this all comes out, are we going to get the dystopian tailspin into just a degraded society? Or are we going to get the golden age? Nick Pope, who actually wrote the Terrible Truth Theory article last year, he said that he thought that the world was ready for disclosure until COVID happened. And he said that the way people behaved during COVID made him just completely reevaluate if people were ready for this. And now he's like, doesn't really think so. So start stocking up on toilet paper. Now, this last clip of Steven Greer was him after he was questioned about all of the weird issues with planes and the plane crashes that have been happening recently.
Is there anything you look at this where you say something's weird? It could be this, it could be that, or look, it was just an accident. There's so much traffic that's going on there. What's your conclusion on what really happened here?
I have no intelligence on this beyond what you have found in the news. I've heard whisperings, but at this point, obviously, there was a chopper in the wrong place at the wrong time. I don't think the American Airlines pilot did anything wrong. I'm a little baffled why the collision warning system didn't have him pull out. But yeah, the rest of it is to be determined. So, and I think it's best not to jump to any conclusions about it.
So I wanted to show that because fair play to Steven Greer there, right? The question felt pretty loaded. It gave Greer like an easy opportunity, if he wanted to take it and run with it and start pointing the fingers again and blaming the military-industrial complex. Like, Patrick Bet-David definitely, loaded up that question for him if he wanted to be like, yeah, that, there's conspiracies going on here. But he didn't. He said, I don't really get told about that stuff. And, but it does seem strange. And it's moments like that I think when these whistleblowers, or, whatever you want to call Greer, they put their hand up and they go, oh, I don't know about that part. I think that's important. To me, it says, that kind of behavior to me suggests that the things that Steven Greer are saying to us is legitimate stuff that is being passed on to him. But I think the biggest question here is how much of that information that he is getting is actually authentic. Because really, if what he's saying is all true, how is he still alive? Like, we just heard earlier that he was offered $2 billion by Bert Stubblebine to keep quiet, and he didn't. So being taken out seems like the usual next option, right? Unless, or they maybe managed to get, a few little worms into Greer's circle that were able to get him on board with like a bunch of nonsense and enough disinformation to muddy up the waters for him. Again, there's probably a lot of truth in what he's saying, but there's probably there could be a lot of misinformation there. Enough that the military were like, okay, the stuff that he's spewing out now, it's so kind of twisted and muddy that it's not as much of a risk to us anymore. Because for him to, but obviously they're okay with him doing what he's doing because, he's alive, and we know that a lot of people aren't who have spoken out. So, does he just maybe not realize that he's compromised? I don't know. I can't prove anything, and neither can you. So these are all possibilities, though, and they're worth considering, and they're reasons why we shouldn't be so quick to judge people one way or another, right? Because we don't have the full picture. So that was the end of Greer. We're now going to move on to the UFO video that I showed you at the very start. So this was sent to me by a viewer of mine who's actually also a longtime friend of mine in real life. I've known this person for a long time. Now, just before I actually hit record for this show, I hit him up, tried to dig up like a few more details to give you about this video. And he kind of pumped the brakes on it a little, which is cool. He did say it was cool to share the video, but until I kind of get the all clear on more information, I don't really have much more context to give you. So I think he would be okay with me saying that this video was recorded in Australia. And from my understanding, it was not recorded by people who are like UFO people, okay? And we'll get into that a little bit more in a sec. I'm sure he would be okay with me saying that, but that's where I'll kind of leave that information for now, and we'll just have to look at the video. So let's take a look at the full clip first, and I will say if you blink, you will miss it.
How long is that going to Is it? Yes. So I was going to...
You see it? I know the first time I watched it, I didn't. I have a feeling that the person who filmed this probably didn't see it either. I mean, you don't hear any reaction from the people filming it to when we see this little thing fly through the sky, right? And it looks like there's some really interesting lightning or something going on behind those clouds. And I'm assuming that was the reason for taking this video. And that's what I was focused on when I watched it, which is why I missed it. And maybe you missed it too. So I've slowed it down and you shouldn't miss it this time. So keep an eye just above the clouds here on the right-hand side. There we go. So that thing is moving very quickly. Let's have a look at it one more time. Like, think about a plane in the sky. Crazy. Think about a plane in the sky, right? To us, when we look at a plane, it doesn't look like it's moving very fast, right? Because of the distance and the perspective, but we know that it's actually moving usually at least like 500 or 600 kilometers per hour. And that's it depends on the size of the plane, but that's like a pretty conservative estimate for a plane. I think we could all agree. So for this thing to be moving at that rate, that's like at a barely visible at that distance, like we are talking thousands of kilometers per hour. And it clearly comes from behind the clouds too. So let's jump back over here quickly. Get rid of this. And so, oh no. Hello. Okay. So I broke down the 6 frames that we can actually see this object, right? So in frame 1, you can see there that it's emerging from the clouds because in the previous frame, there's nothing there. And then, it just kind of, I mean, think about this, right? This thing is visible for 6 frames, and this video was shot at 30 frames per second. So you can fit 30 of these in 1 second. So 6 frames is equal to 1/5 of a second, or like 0.2 seconds, okay? So again, let's think back to that plane analogy and how planes move in the sky and the distance they cover in the time that they cover when we're looking at them. Look at the distance that this thing is moving in 0.2 seconds. Like, do we have any math wizards or trigonometry experts that can work like some distance out here and exact speeds? Because whatever this thing is, it is crazy fast. And when I was watching this initially, I assumed that like there was like lightning or something going on behind the clouds. And there's obviously a long-standing history between, electrical storms and UFOs, right? We know that. Or if you don't know that, you do now. But when I watched it again, I'm thinking like, well, hang on. Lightning usually strikes like from the top and comes down, right? Like when the clouds are up here, you might see lightning illuminate a cloud when you're sort of looking up. But this is like on the horizon and we can see the sky. It's clear. But there are these weird like lightning effects going on behind the clouds. Now, I don't know if there is an explanation for that. I genuinely have no clue, but it's very interesting. So please get in the comments if you feel like you can weigh in on that part. Now, I also, I zoomed in on a couple more frames and I sort of played with the colors a little bit just so it was a bit more clearer. And I also upscaled it just a little bit. It doesn't give us too much more to work with other than it kind of really confirms that there is something very real and very solid moving in the sky there. I'll also point out that this object appears to look like a disc in these freeze frames, but given the rate of speed that this thing must be moving at, we are very likely getting a warped or stretched version of what is actually there. Now, I can't say that for sure, but if I had to guess that this object is likely more of like a spherical shape or something. It's like, that's just my opinion based on how camera shutters work, right? Shutter speed versus the speed of the object creates blur. And I'm sure we can all grasp how movement creates blur when we try to take photos with our iPhones, right? I think what we are seeing here is no different to that. So I'm going to jump back and I'm sure a video didn't play. Amazing. So until I can get a little bit more info on that video for you guys, yeah, that's all I have to leave you with, unfortunately. But I do think there's a little bit more information to come. But without that, super cool video. Definitely more to work with and look at there than the average dot against the night sky that we kind of see all over TikTok. Because, you know, there's plenty of those. They're interesting, but I'm not going to show them on here because they're kind of boring at this point. But they're still cool. Now, some of you guys earlier this week may have seen that I was invited to be on a podcast for the first time, which was awesome. That was really cool. So that was with Joe from the UAP Reporting Center on X. So he invited me onto the first episode of his new podcast, which is called Beyond Top Secret. And it was a lot of fun. We nearly did like a full 3 hours. And I've got a little vertical clip here from the show of me advocating for the New World Order. Is that such a bad thing? Well, it depends, right? It depends. I mean, imagine if it was like, if you can't play nice with anybody, then like you don't belong here. And, you know, and I mean that in the harshest way. Like if you are not,
that's what it would take.
Yeah. And, you know, that's a very strong point to make, but imagine if that was the case. It's like, hey, if you can't play nice on this earth, you will not exist on this earth. And that's a very harsh way to deal with things, but perhaps we would need that for a little while to be like, hey, everyone get in line. Otherwise, this whole thing is not going to work. Okay. So, and, you know, you could be like, wow, that's like a totalitarian dictatorship, New World Order. And it's like, yeah, you could look at it like that. And let me be clear. I'm not advocating for the New World Order here, but
get yourself in trouble.
I'm just trying to explore the possibility that it might not necessarily be a bad thing. Because you look at countries like Singapore, for example. If you spit chewing gum on the floor in Singapore, you go to jail. Like they don't play around over there. And it's one of the most neatest, tidiest, low crime rate countries in the world. But to get to that point of like this harmony, they had to enforce some pretty strict rules.
Like consequences.
Yeah, that's right. So yeah, if that's what it took and we did then get a world, you know, like if you had to enforce the rules that hard to make sure everyone's in line, but as a result of that, now that we know there's nobody nefarious, no one's trying to do anything crazy, there's no terrorist attacks, now we get free energy. Now we can have these craft that will take you from London to Australia in 20 seconds because we trust that no one's going to take this technology and use it to drop a nuclear bomb on the White House.
Right. It's what the world could be if it wasn't for humans screwing it up.
That's right. But they can't give you that. They can't give us that unless there is this trust that we're not going to go crazy with it. So to gain that trust, maybe there does have to be some strict rules. Who's with me? New World Order, baby. Let's go. No, I'm kidding. You know what I'm like. I like to play both sides. You know, I like to consider all options because everyone always does talk about the New World Order as a bad thing. But like, I do think like it doesn't have to be seen in a nefarious light. Like it could be a good thing if it was done the right way. If it meant we all got it, UFOs and free energy and no poverty, I mean, that sounds like a good thing to me. But, you know, would that actually happen? I don't know. And also, I'll just clarify this as well, because I'm sure there'll be someone going, actually, you don't go to jail. You don't go to jail if you spit chewing gum on the floor in Singapore, but it is a criminal offense. Okay, so, you know, maybe if you had a record and then you spat chewing gum, you might go to jail. But yeah, just wanted to clear that up. Okay, I was just trying to make a point on the show. So in that chat, we covered everything like UFOs, aliens, fun theories, religion. We even talked about me a fair bit and like my personal life. So I would love it if you guys went over there and checked that out. Get in the comments over there. Let him know where you came from. Subscribe to Joe. He's a great guy. He's got a very positive attitude, good outlook on things, and that's what we want. They're the kind of people we want to support. So I'll leave a link to that in the show notes as well. Now, guys, I love saving these little fun clips for you at the end of the episode. I think it's just such a cool way to like sign off the show, and you know, it gives you a little something for hanging in there the whole way. And I hope you guys have been enjoying them as well. So today's clip is the most insane example of either predictive programming or the good ETs placing these ideas into the minds of artists to prepare us for what's coming. Or maybe it's just showing us that the powers that be they've known about this and have known a lot more for a long time, and they haven't been telling us. Like, it is the most blatant example of the perspective of like the common man versus the military mind when it comes to this topic of UFOs and things like that, or at least that's how it feels like it today. So I'm going to show you that in just a sec, but first, thank you all for watching the show today, guys. If you have made it this far, please, and you've enjoyed it, please let me know in the comments. Okay, drop me a comment, let me know you enjoyed the show, give the video a like, share it around. All that stuff really helps us grow. There's a good chance that by the time you watch this, I'm going to be on the way to Japan, or maybe even in Japan. But I've got a few things in the works that I'm cooking up to hopefully keep a little something coming on the channel. And who knows, maybe we drop a surprise live stream in Tokyo or something like that. So a special thank you to you guys, the Polarity channel members, for going the extra mile to support me. The generosity of you guys honestly blows me away. Like, I'm super, super grateful for that. So thank you to each and every one of you. Stay objective, guys. Don't rush to pick a side. We are watching the greatest story of all time unravel before our eyes, and it's going to impact everybody, and it's exciting. Let's embrace it. Stay positive. Keep analyzing each new piece of the puzzle as it comes. So be good to each other. Be kind. Get outside and touch grass. Do all the right things, and I'll see you guys next time.
I'll have to ask you to keep completely quiet about this for the present anyway.
Yeah, I guess the folks down in Oak Ridge would get panicky if they knew there was some kind of mysterious object up here. You can count on me, Colonel.
Good. Any idea what keeps this thing off the ground? Defying the law of gravity.
Well, it's something like gravity in reverse, I think, like anti-gravity.
Anti-gravity? Never heard of a force like that?
For years, it's been nothing but a theory. But then again, I've never seen an object from interstellar space before, either.
Knowledge of what makes this thing work could be the greatest military weapon of all time. Space supremacy could be ours overnight.
They do say knowledge is power.
That's right.
There are two kinds of power, constructive and destructive. You talk of space supremacy and weapons. I say that's the wrong type of thinking.
I guess you're entitled to your opinion.
Look, Colonel, this object has obviously traveled millions of miles through outer space. Some intelligence has caused it to be here. Some technology far superior to ours. Where it came from, how it got to be here, what it's here for, those are the important questions.
I believe it's a question of which team you're on.
There's only one team now, Colonel, ever since Hiroshima. The military and science are one and the same now.
I agree with you, Dr.